Adrian had always been the quiet one. In every room, in every conversation, in every moment that seemed to call for a spark of energy, he would remain in the background, watching, listening, taking everything in but giving so little of himself away. Some people found it strange, others called it mysterious, and a few even assumed it was arrogance. But to me it was something else entirely. We worked in the same office for over 2 years. He sat 3 desks away, tucked neatly by the window, always with his head bent over his laptop and his earphones in. Though half the time I suspected he wasn't listening to anything. He was simply shutting the world out. He rarely joined the team for lunch, and when he did, his words were few and carefully chosen. I wouldn't say I was drawn to him at first. He was just another coworker, someone whose existence was part of the rhythm of the office. But slowly, without realizing it, I began to notice him in the quiet ways that one notices the constant hum of a fan or the ticking of a clock. He was always there, steady and calm. While others competed for attention, Adrian remained content in silence. What intrigued me most wasn't his silence, though. It was his eyes. They were thoughtful, observant, and carried the weight of unspoken things. Whenever I happened to meet his gaze, even briefly, it felt as though he saw far more than he let on. Months passed, and I began finding small reasons to cross his path. A question about a spreadsheet, a comment about the weather, an excuse to pass by his desk. His answers were polite, always kind, but never more than a few words. I often walked away wondering if I had imagined the flicker of softness in his expression, the subtle hint that he wanted to say more but didn't. The truth is, Adrian intimidated me, not because of who he was outwardly, but because of what he seemed to hide. It was as though his silence wasn't emptiness, but rather a lock, and I couldn't help but want to know what lay behind it. It wasn't until one evening, long after most of the office had left, that the lock finally began to turn. I had stayed late to finish a project, my desk lamp the only light glowing in the open space. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence, and I almost didn't notice when Adrian rose from his desk. He lingered for a moment, glancing at me before slipping his bag over his shoulder. I thought he was leaving, but instead, he walked over and stopped a few feet away. "You're always the last one here," he said. I blinked in surprise. His voice, though quiet, carried a warmth I hadn't expected. It was the longest sentence I had ever heard him say to me. "Deadlines don't wait," I replied with a small laugh, though my heart was suddenly beating faster. He nodded, his gaze thoughtful as always. Then, after a pause, he added, "You push yourself too much." The words were simple, yet they startled me. Not just because he spoke them, but because they carried an understanding I didn't know he had of me. For a moment, I forgot how to respond. "You notice things," I finally said. His lips curved almost into a smile. "I notice more than you think." Something shifted in the air between us then. His tone wasn't casual, it was layered, as though each word held a hidden meaning. Before I could untangle it, he glanced at the clock and murmured, "Don't stay too late," before walking out. That night I couldn't sleep. His words replayed in my mind, echoing louder than they had sounded in the quiet office. "I notice more than you think." The next day, I found myself watching him differently. Every small detail, how he adjusted his sleeves, how he looked out the window when he thought no one was watching, how he lingered just slightly when I passed by, seemed to carry significance. And though he didn't speak much more than usual, something about the way he looked at me had changed. Or maybe I was just finally paying attention. Days turned into weeks, and the unspoken tension grew stronger. I started staying late at the office more often. And without fail, Adrian lingered too. Sometimes we exchanged a few words, sometimes none at all, but the silence we shared felt strangely full. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the windows, I found him standing by the glass, staring at the blurred city lights. I walked over, curiosity tugging me closer. "Don't you ever get tired of the quiet?" I asked. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "Not when the quiet has meaning." "What does that mean?" I pressed gently. He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor before lifting back to meet mine. And then, as though deciding something within himself, he spoke words that left me frozen. "Silence has always been safer for me. People expect less from it." But with you, he trailed off, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. With you the silence feels alive. Like I don't need words to say what I mean. But if I stay silent forever, I'll regret it. My breath caught. The room seemed to shrink, the sound of the rain fading beneath the weight of his confession. He had spoken more in that moment than in the entire time I had known him, and every word struck me deeply. What is it you're afraid to say? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time, the walls I had always sensed around him seemed to crumble. That I see you, he said. Not just at your desk, not just in passing conversations. I see how you carry yourself, how you try to be strong even when you're tired, how you keep giving when no one gives back. And I can't stop noticing you. The honesty in his words left me shaken. My chest ached, not from pain but from the intensity of being understood in a way I hadn't expected. I didn't know you felt that way. I managed. I didn't want you to, he admitted quietly. I thought it was easier to stay reserved, to keep everything inside. But the truth is, keeping it in has been harder than saying it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain outside seemed to match the rhythm of my heart, steady and relentless. And in that silence, everything between us shifted. From then on, things changed, not dramatically but in the subtle ways that matter most. Adrian didn't suddenly become outgoing or loud, but he began to open up in pieces. He shared bits of his past, his struggles, his fears, the reasons he found safety in silence. I learned that his reserve wasn't distance, but rather protection, a way to shield himself from the world's harshness. In turn, I found myself sharing parts of me I rarely revealed to anyone. Late nights in the office became our space, a quiet sanctuary where words flowed not constantly, but meaningfully. And though he never spoke in grand declarations, his words always carried weight. Every time he said, I see you, or I understand, it felt like a vow, more powerful than anything rehearsed or polished. One evening, as we walked out of the office together, he paused at the door. The city was alive with lights, the air crisp with possibility. He looked at me, his expression steady but vulnerable. I was always reserved, he said softly. But you've given me a reason to speak. And I don't want to stop. In that moment, I realized that love doesn't always come with fireworks or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the words of someone who has spent years holding them back. And when they finally let them out, they carry the power to shake you in the best possible way.